The wooden chest had been sitting at the back of the attic for decades, half hidden beneath folded blankets and dust-covered boxes that no one had bothered to open since my grandmother's passing. It was the kind of chest that seemed to carry within it the weight of forgotten generations, its surface scratched and marked by time, yet still strong enough to preserve what mattered most. On the day I finally opened it, I wasn't looking for anything particular, just chasing nostalgia, a way to feel closer to her again. What I found inside would change the way I looked at her life, my life, and even the small details of daily existence. Inside the chest, neatly stacked and carefully wrapped, were notebooks, jars, and loose pages tied together with string. At the top, in my grandmother's elegant handwriting, the words stood out like a whisper across time. Grandma's recipes. At first, I thought they were simply her cooking notes. The pies she made for Sunday lunches, the soups that carried us through winter colds, the breads whose aroma filled the house on early mornings. But as I flipped through the fragile pages, I realized these weren't just culinary instructions. They were fragments of her philosophy, records of quiet magic woven into everyday life, a delicate blend of food, care, and something almost mystical. The recipes were more than meals. They were remedies, elixirs, and rituals meant to soothe, strengthen, and inspire. She had called them her miracle teas and healing brews, though she had never spoken of them in such grand terms while alive. To her, it was just part of living, a way to bring harmony to the body and spirit. One entry stood out, written with more emphasis than the rest, as if it carried particular importance. It read simply, "Lemon balm tea, to calm the nerves." That was all, yet it carried such weight. My grandmother had always been a serene presence in our family, even when chaos surrounded us. Arguments at the dinner table would lose their sharpness in her presence. Storms of anxiety that plagued my teenage years seemed to soften whenever she sat beside me. I remembered nights when I couldn't sleep, overwhelmed by exams, heartbreak, or just the buzzing unease of youth, and she would walk into the kitchen quietly, as if she had been listening from afar. Minutes later, she'd place a steaming cup in front of me, its fragrance both citrusy and floral, its warmth wrapping around me like a blanket. She would say nothing about the tea itself, never mentioning lemon balm or its properties. She simply offered it, and somehow it worked. The world seemed less sharp, less demanding after those small rituals. Reading her words in the notebook transported me back to those moments, but it also opened a question I had never asked. Why did she know so much about these herbs, these quiet remedies? Where had she learned them, and what had they meant to her? As I read further, I realized that her recipes weren't mere household traditions. They were a heritage passed down, notes from her mother and grandmother before her, layered with her own discoveries. Each page told not just how to prepare something, but when to use it, how to serve it, and most importantly, the spirit in which it should be given. She believed that food and drink carried intention, that the heart of the one who prepared it was as vital as the ingredients themselves. To soothe a troubled child, to mend a broken spirit, to gather a family around a table, these were her true measures of success. The deeper I went into her notebooks, the more I began to understand the way she had woven these miracle teas into our lives without ever making a spectacle of them. There were instructions for ginger and honey infusions to strengthen the immune system in cold months, lavender blends to invite restful sleep, and chamomile mixtures to ease indigestion. Each came with notes that felt like advice from beyond the grave. Remember to breathe while you stir. Offer this with a smile, for it works twice as well. Never prepare when angry, or it loses its strength. It wasn't science alone. It was intention, a reminder that healing was as much about spirit as it was about body. The phrase lemon balm tea, to calm the nerves, echoed in my mind for days. In a world that never seems to stop moving, where stress weaves itself into every corner of our existence. The simplicity of that sentence felt revolutionary. To calm the nerves. How many of us even know how to do that anymore? My grandmother had known, instinctively. She had seen the frantic pace of modern life and answered not with grand solutions, but with small, consistent acts of care. She had trusted in the power of nature, the gentleness of herbs, and the sacredness of simple moments shared over a steaming cup. Curiosity led me to recreate her recipes, beginning with the lemon balm tea. I went to the garden where, almost miraculously, a patch of lemon balm still grew, as if it had been waiting for me all these years. Its leaves were bright green, exuding a calming fragrance as I touched them, and I could not help but feel that she had planted them for exactly this purpose, to be rediscovered when I needed them most. I gathered a handful, rinsed them carefully, and brewed them slowly in boiling water, just as her notes instructed. The scent filled the kitchen with a soft, lemony aroma that felt instantly familiar, a fragrance that belonged not just to plants, but to memory itself. As I sipped the tea, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't dramatic, not a lightning bolt of change, not a sudden disappearance of every worry. Instead, it was a gentle loosening, a reminder to breathe, to slow down, to be present. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched, and I realized that the ritual was as important as the tea itself. Preparing it with intention, waiting for the leaves to steep, holding the warm cup between my hands, it all became a meditation, a return to stillness. In that moment, I felt closer to my grandmother than I had in years, as though she were guiding me back to the wisdom she had lived by. This discovery sparked a quiet transformation in my life. I began to pay more attention to the way I moved through my days, the habits I carried without thought. Instead of rushing through breakfast, I allowed myself to sit, to savor, to breathe. Instead of grabbing coffee absent-mindedly, I experimented with her herbal blends, noticing how each one seemed to carry a different mood, a different message. It wasn't just about health. It was about presence, about honoring the body and spirit. The phrase miracle teas no longer felt quaint. It felt true. The miracles weren't always visible, but they were felt. In calmer conversations, in softer nights of sleep, in moments of gratitude that bloomed unexpectedly. As weeks passed, I shared these discoveries with friends and family, offering them cups of tea just as my grandmother had once done for me. I watched their shoulders relax, their conversations slow, their eyes soften. One evening after a long day, a friend confessed that the tea had done more for her anxiety than any quick distraction or rushed solution she usually turned to. It was then that I realized what my grandmother had truly given us. Not recipes, but a way of being. Her teas were vessels for love, reminders that care could be simple yet profound, that healing often begins with presence. And so the notebooks became my companions, guiding me not just in the kitchen but in life. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, I returned to her words. Lemon balm tea, to calm the nerves. It became a mantra, a practice, a way to remember that peace is not found in grand escapes or complicated solutions, but in the gentle rituals that ground us. I began writing my own notes in the margins, documenting how these teas fit into my modern life, how they helped me navigate challenges my grandmother could never have imagined, yet somehow had already prepared me for. I realized then that I was continuing her legacy, weaving her wisdom into the fabric of my own existence, ensuring it would not be forgotten. Looking back now, I see that opening that chest in the attic was more than a discovery of old papers. It was a doorway into a different way of living. My grandmother had left me not only her recipes, but also her quiet faith in the everyday sacred, her belief that life could be healed and transformed through simple acts of care. She had trusted that one day I would need these teachings, and she had left them behind like seeds, waiting for the right season to bloom. And in honoring them, I found myself not just remembering her, but becoming more like her. Perhaps that is the true miracle of her teas. Not only do they calm the body and soothe the nerves, but they also carry the essence of love across time, binding generations through shared rituals. They remind us that healing is not always about curing, but about caring. Not always about grand gestures, but about small, consistent offerings of presence and warmth. And in a world that often forgets the power of stillness, perhaps the greatest recipe of all is the one that teaches us how to pause, breathe, and return to ourselves.